In this ultimate guide, I'm going to show you how to write your first song. I'll start by showing you how to write your first chord progression so you can make music straight away. Then I'll give you a simple to follow outline for writing a song. This framework can be used again and again to easily write songs. This is followed by a deeper dive into writing great melodies and some tools to help you with your songwriting journey. Then there's a special treat for anyone interested in rock music where I reveal how to write your first rock song and how to turn any riff into a full song. If you watch all of this video, then you'll have a logical framework for writing your own song. Let's begin. Chords are like different places in the city. Each place has a purpose, and that helps decide how you get there. This is also how chord progressions work. The way you move between different chords will have a big impact on the sound and feel of your music. And once you can build chord progressions, then you can go on to construct whole songs. You might have watched videos on YouTube that make this seem difficult or complicated. I'm going to change that and get you real results straight away with the Chord City system. In my over 20 years of songwriting, I still find the most interesting part to be building chord progressions. The range of sound and feeling you can get from chords is amazing. But the big problem for many is that they can become overwhelmed. There are so many chords and all sorts of complicated theory that it can be impossible to know where to start. Maybe you're a new guitarist who can only play a few simple open chords and you feel like this is holding you back. Or you don't play any instrument but want to get into making music electronically. This is why I developed the Chord City system. In our day-to-day life, we move between different places to do different things. We understand that the order we do things in a day can affect how we feel, and this will change depending on our schedule. Chord progressions are much the same. You move between different chords to create different sounds and feelings. Many patterns repeat, like your normal working day, but there is also space for variation and difference. This concept makes visualizing and building chord progressions much more straightforward for beginners. So let's look at the chords that will make up the buildings in our city. The first and most important chord is C major. C major is a simple chord to play on guitar and piano. In a Chord City system, C major is home. What feelings do you associate with home? I'd say safety, comfort, stability and security. If we're going about our day, then we almost always start and end at home. And from home you can go anywhere you like in the city. So I'll put C at the bottom of our map and draw a little house around it. The next chord is A minor. Again, this is an easy chord to play on guitar and piano. You can think of A minor as a garden for our house, or if you don't have a garden, you can also consider it like a public park. It's another place to relax and unwind. Many would consider it an extension of the house, as they are closely related in function. You might not use it all of the time, particularly if the weather's bad, but it's still somewhere you feel at ease. As such, you can move freely from C major to A minor and it will sound good. They are two of the easiest chords to change between on the guitar, so are a great basis for chord progressions. I'll add A minor next to our house and draw a tree around it. All other chords will be either major or minor, so there are no complicated chords in this city. Everything in the Chord City has been harmonious and relaxing so far, so let's bring in something a bit different now. What emotions do you associate with work? Maybe you love your job, but for many people it's somewhere that is stressful and tiring. This leads to the phrase, living for the weekend, where you hate work so much that you are just tolerating it to enjoy your days off. This place of tension is where our next chord lives, G major. G major is another simple chord to play on guitar, and you'll see it everywhere in popular music. G major is going to be our office block or workplace in the city. It makes you tense, and the longer you are there, the more you want to go home. A few people might want to hang out here longer if they love work, so this will come down to personal preference. I'll put G major in an office block to the west of the city. How do you move around a city? Walk, cycle, car? It obviously depends on your circumstances and where you live. But for many bigger cities, a train or metro system is critical for keeping things running. But why do people use the train? Where are they going? Well, the short answer is everywhere. You take the train to go to work in the morning. You might take the train to go shopping or for a hospital appointment. If you're heading out for a few drinks, it's probably a good idea to take the train instead of driving your car. Whatever our destination, heading to the train station signals that we're going somewhere. This role will be played in our Chord City with the chord F major. It will provide movement. Now I know that beginner guitarists struggle a bit with the F chord because even in open position, it involves barring some strings. If this is a problem for you, then don't panic. As you'll see, we don't always have to use this chord in our progressions. I'll put F at the north of the city and represent it with a badly drawn train. Where do you go to relax in public? What about if you want to meet a friend or take a break before or after work? Many people will head to their local coffee shop. It's somewhere where you go to socialise, to escape the grind of work or get a caffeine boost for your commute. It's a place of movement, hustle and bustle, but with a more relaxed edge compared to the train station. In our chord city, the coffee shop is represented with the D minor chord. I'll put this in the east of the city. Is there somewhere in your home that you don't see much? Maybe a room or space which exists mainly for storage? I'd consider a loft or an attic like this. It's part of your home, your safe and relaxing space, and yet you don't see or use it every day. This is going to be played by the E minor chord, which I'll place in the roof of our house. This chord won't feature in the example progressions coming up, but you are free to use it, and it's a useful part of the city. If you want to start using chords in the city but don't know how to play an instrument, then I strongly recommend HookPad. HookPad is a musical sketchpad with music theory built in. It lets you quickly and easily create and store song ideas. It's free to get started, so click the link in the description now and follow along as I guide you around the chord city. Now we have a map of the city, you can start to think about how you'll move around it. This is how we build chord progressions. You can think of each stop on your route as part of the progression. You are of course free to move around the city as you see fit. Feel free to try things out and experiment, but just like real life, there are some routes that are more popular than others. I'll show you some of these journeys now. Please note that I will always end the journeys with our home chord, C major. You don't have to do this, but it helps to provide a point of rest before moving on to other examples. The first journey is probably the most foundational. It's the basis of many chord progressions and has a nice blend of rest, movement and tension. It highlights the importance of home and work in our lives and progressions. It's home, train, work, home, or CFGC. Many songs are written with 3 major chords and a single minor chord. The next progression is arguably the most popular of these. It's C, G, A minor, F. Pay attention to how the home of C major and garden of A minor sound compared to the office of G and the train of F. This progression is a great example of how the different parts of chord city feel. So far we've always started with the security of home, but what if our journey begins somewhere else? Imagine starting your day in a coffee shop, trying to relax and get ready for what's ahead. You then head to the office for a day of work and finally make your way back home for the evening. That's how we'll build the next progression, D minor, G and C. Listen out for the use of the D minor chord at the beginning. Next up is another journey that begins at the coffee shop, but this time we take an extended break, moving to the garden, then home, and finally ending up at work. Listen for how the tension is only ramped up at the end with the G major chord, before resolving with C major. It shows the importance of chord placement when building your own progressions. In the next progression, we start at home again, and then go from the train to the coffee shop. We've heard these chords before, but not in this order. This shows you how where you place chords has a big impact on how they sound in your progressions. Listen out for how the D minor chord sounds after the F major chord. The next example uses the most popular collection of chords, but this time starts with the garden with A minor. This gives it a smooth beginning, and then it has a descending feeling as we move towards the C major chord at the end of the progression. Always be mindful of where C major lies in your progression, as the power of home is always present in music and will shape the sound of the city. Earlier we saw how pairing two minor chords together provides a gentle melancholy. Here's another use of this idea, this time moving from the comfort of the garden to the bustle of the coffee shop in a classic smooth transition. Now you've learnt some of the most common journeys around the city, you will have the confidence to travel your own path. There are no areas you can't travel to, so try and experiment with putting chords in different orders and see what you like the sound of. Now you understand chord progressions, it's time to write all of the parts of a song. Writing a song is like choosing a route to a destination. You know where you want to end up, but there are a huge amount of ways to get there. You could walk, cycle, take public transport or drive. But whatever mode you end up taking, the most difficult journey will be your first one. This is just like writing a song. There are three broad approaches you can take, but when you're new to this, it can become overwhelming knowing where to start. Imagine that a complete song is the final destination on a map. In order to get there, we need to plot a route. And to do this, we need a starting point. With songwriting, there are three main starting points: chords, melody, and lyrics. Which one of these you decide to work on first will dictate the route you take to the land of completed songs. So where do you begin when writing your first song? My recommendation is to start with the chords. Chords are the building blocks of songs and can instantly provide a certain feel and structure. They are also one of the first things that people learn to play on guitar and piano. As such, they give us a beginner-friendly framework to begin with. Now the big question arrives: what chords do I play? Well, you may have heard of something called a key. You can think of a key as a group of related chords that sound good when played with each other. If you load up HookPad for the first time, you'll be presented with the chords in the key of C major. You'll see that there are 7 of them. Each one is labelled with a Roman numeral from 1 to 7. The use of these numerals will become apparent shortly. So which key do you choose for your song? My default response is to use C major. It has plenty of easy to play chords on guitar, has no sharp or flat chords, and uses just the white keys on piano. It's also simple to use if you're composing electronically in software or have no songwriting experience. But this might not be the best fit for you. Particularly if you're a beginner guitarist, think about what chords you are able to play. Then think about how easily you can switch between these chords. Use this knowledge to decide your key. You don't need to be able to play all 7 chords, as I'll show you in a moment, but the more you can use, the better. For example, many guitarists like to use the key of G major because it uses simple open chords. To explore what chords are in each key in HookPad, click on the key button and then click on one of the letters from the wheel. This will update the selection of chords. You may notice that there are choices beyond the major keys, such as minor, but I would avoid them for your first few songs at least. Chords get played in sequences known as chord progressions. You can take any of the 7 chords in a key and play them after one another in any order you like to create a progression. But to make life easier, there are some basic progressions which get used over and over again. This is where the Roman numerals are useful. They indicate the function of the chord in any major key. This means you'll often see progressions written just as Roman numerals. You can then use them in any key that you like. The most important chord is 1. This is the chord your key is named after. For example, the 1 chord in the key of C major is C major. You can think of chord 1, or the tonic, as the home chord. It offers grounding and stability. It feels safe and secure. When a chord progression arrives back at chord 1, it provides resolution and a strong sense of having finished. Many songs will end on the 1 chord to provide the listener with a satisfying feeling of completion. After chord 1, the 5 chord is the second most important. When placed before the 1 chord, it helps to generate the powerful feeling of returning home. This sense of resolution is often referred to as a cadence. A cadence can be strong or weak, depending on the impression of finality that it brings. The 4 chord can also be used in the cadence when moving back to the 1 chord. You may know this as the plagal cadence or the Amen cadence. It has a slightly softer or more subtle feeling than the 5 to 1 change. These 3 major chords are important in defining a major key song. They are like musical scaffolding from which you can build out other chords and ideas, but are structurally integral to the major key. The positioning of these 3 important chords can make or break a song. To select chords in HookPad, just click on the relevant chord in the list. It will then appear in the player below. Here you can edit the duration of each chord if you want. Here's how 1-4-5 sounds in the key of C major. For the sake of your first song, you can just experiment by adding one chord to the 1-4-5 to provide some variation and define different parts of your song with the use of minor chords. Many famous songs don't use more than 4 chords, so you'll have plenty to work with already. For example, the chords 1, 4, 5 and 6 could be played the following ways. Once you've written some chord progressions, it's time to move on to the next part of the route towards a completed song, the melody. The most important relationship in music is between harmony and melody. That is the chords you play and the tune, usually sung, over the top. The notes in the underlying chords will colour and shape the feel of the melody. Standard major and minor chords contain 3 notes and are called triads. If you use any of these notes from the chord to play a melody over the top, then there will be no conflict between the two. This is how you make simple, pleasing melodies, and also reveals why writing the chords first was going to make our life easier later on. But how do you know what notes are in each chord? You could search online and find notes chord by chord, but this would be time consuming. Luckily, HookPad has all of this information built in. If you mouse over one of the chords in your song, it will highlight the notes in the melody area directly above. If you click on this melody area, you'll see that the chord selector above changes to a note selector, and the chord notes are indicated with a small blue dot. That's all you need to know to get started with melody. Play around with the chord notes and look to add some rests when no melody plays. For example, here's a 1-5-6-4 progression with a simple chord note melody. This chord note melody can act as a great scaffold. Then you can add the odd non-chord note melody to spice things up a bit. So you'll have 7 notes to choose from, so 4 are not in the chord. Some of these might not sound great, so be prepared to experiment. It's also worth talking about rhythm at this point. The examples so far have had 1 chord per bar and only use quarter notes in the melody. But you can make any chord or note shorter or longer than this. This is where you can really add some character to your songwriting. If you want inspiration, listen to your favourite song and note how often the chords change. You can then copy this duration for your own chord changes. This can create riff-like moments in your song if the chords change quite often. Just make sure you are able to play at the same speed if you're going to perform the song. And as the chords are so closely related to the melody, this new rhythm will carry over to your melody and really bring your song to life. Here's the 1-5-6-4 example again, with some new rhythmic interest and a couple of non-chord notes in the melody. Listen to how much more interesting this now is. We've covered chords and melody, and with some rhythmic variation, you can now write a whole song. But one thing worth mentioning is song structure. If you think of writing a song like cooking a delicious meal, we've taken the different ingredients, mixed them together in the right quantity, but now we need to think about how we present the dish. This is where structure comes in. Structure is the layout of your song and the role that each part has. These roles are known as song sections. These include ones you may have heard of, such as verse and chorus. Generally speaking, the chorus is the focal point of your song. It repeats each time it is heard, often with the song title or main hook contained within it. Melodically, the chorus will usually have the highest note of the song to signify its importance and make it memorable. The verse is used to support the chorus and progress the narrative if you have lyrics. It's normal for the lyrics to change from verse to verse, but the music to stay the same. You might get other song sections like intros, outros and bridges. These are used to maintain interest, set the scene of a song, or end it in a certain way. My main piece of advice for creating variation between sections is to hold back a certain chord for a key moment. For example, maybe the only minor chord you use features in the verse. You can also use variations in how often the chords change to signal different song parts. This can give you variety without using new chords if you're keeping things really simple. If you are really stuck with this, try a song structure such as intro, verse, chorus, bridge or middle eight, chorus, outro. This is a very common song structure and will feel familiar to you. I would use this as your starting framework to get a song written easily. You can always deviate, extend or alter this later on if you want to. Start with each section being 8 bars long. Once you have more experience, you can become more adventurous. But to begin, you want to complete a few songs, and sticking to this rule will help you achieve this. The next stop on our journey is the lyric. If you are happy with an instrumental song, then obviously you can skip this step. But for the rest of you, let's look at the part that most songwriters struggle with. Song lyrics are one of the biggest obstacles for songwriters. The amount of meaning and emotion tied up in so few words can become overwhelming. They become such a big burden that they get put off to the end and never finished. And a lot of songwriters are musicians to begin with, so haven't worked with words before. There's a reason why Elton John worked with Bernie Taupin. There are so many ways to approach lyric writing that it could form a course in its own right. My goal here is to try and give you a way to write lyrics that is easy to do in a short amount of time and produce reasonable results for most people. So if you're a reluctant lyricist, hopefully this will help you to at least finish some lyrics. What you think of them may be another question. All you have to do is set a timer for at least 10 minutes. Write down everything that comes to mind with no filter. The more you can get down, the better. This is best done the old-fashioned way with pen or pencil and paper. And don't throw away any old attempts from these sessions, as these can be used in the future. Completely turn off your filter and just get words on the page. Then, once the time is up, see if you can spot any lines or themes that stand out. Write them out and then start to loop your song in HookPad. You do this by pressing loop in the top left and then adjusting the yellow bar to the section that you want to loop. Then you can work out how the syllables of your lyric will work with the melody. Do the words feel like they fit with the music? Keep doing this until you feel like you have a reasonable draft of your lyrics. Congratulations, you've just completed your first song. Most people don't get this far, so this is a real achievement. You can take longer to refine your song if you want. I recommend putting it to one side and coming back a few days later with fresh eyes and ears. You'll then have a bit of distance from the writing to spot anything you might want to change. This process could be used to write a song in almost any genre, but you might want to adapt it to your own musical taste. What you change will depend on the sound you're trying to achieve. For example, if you're writing rap, you might focus more on lyrical rhythmic flow rather than complex harmony. If you're writing a rock song, you might base your song around a riff, and lyrics aren't as important. Experiment with elements that feature the most in your favourite types of music. This is where learning to play songs that you like can inspire you to write differently. The most important part of a song is the melody. Now you know the basics, it's time to learn how to write truly great melodies and elevate your music. The starting point for a great melody is a chord progression. There are a few chord progressions that get used a lot in popular music, which is part of the reason why many songs sound the same. I'm going to keep this really simple and show you how to write a melody by using one of the most popular chord progressions. Then I'll reveal how to make your melodies truly unique and interesting. This will elevate even the most boring progressions into a great song part. You'll be able to do this whatever your musical or songwriting ability might be. Here's the progression we'll be working with: C major, G major, A minor, F major and C major. Each chord is constructed with a set of notes. When played together, you hear the sound and feel of that chord. Here are the notes contained in our example progression. C major uses C, E and G. G major is constructed with G, B and D. A minor has the notes A, C and E, and F major uses F, A and C. These notes can be used to craft simple melodies. All you have to do is use the notes in the chord whilst that chord plays. Then as the chords change, you change to the next set of melody notes. You can see an example of this on screen. This will create a pleasing, harmonious melody. This basic technique is used in many songs and it's a great way to start crafting your melodies. Look at how each bar starts with the root note of the underlying chord. These are the notes that the chords are named after. You can quickly see this because the chord and note have the same colour. Here's how that sounds. Starting each bar with the root note of the chord is the most predictable and safe way to craft your melody. So let's now begin the process of creating some interest and surprise. In the next example, I use the same melodic rhythm as before, but start on chord notes other than the root. Listen to how this has a different feel to starting on the root note. I've also chosen notes that descend at the start of each bar, providing a pull down towards the end of the melody before it rises back up. Even though we only have a very limited palette of notes at the moment, there is still so much you can do to change up your melodies. You will have noticed that I have used different note lengths, which provide different feels to the melody. You are free to make notes as long or short as you like. The other important factor is where in each bar notes are played. In previous examples, the notes have always started on beat 1 of each bar. This coincided with the chord changes, giving them a predictability of moving in lockstep. In the next example, I'll make one change and shift the start of the melodies in bars 1 and 3 forward slightly. Nothing else will change. Listen to how this transforms the feel of the melody with minimal effort. You can always use this idea to get more value out of your melodies that you have created. Working with chord notes is a great starting point for melodies, but now it's time to take things up to the next level. The next step is to try out non-chord tones. These are just the notes that aren't in the underlying chord. There are 12 notes in Western music, so plenty to choose from. But to make this a bit easier, I'll use the 7 notes from the C major scale. That is just the white keys on the piano. The reason for this is because our progression is in the key of C major. These extra notes can be used to link your chord notes. These are known as passing notes. I'll use them in the next example with the F and A notes in bar 1. Listen to how they bring something a bit different and interesting to the melody, creating a smoother overall feel. In bar 2, I place the non-chord notes more prominently. I start and end the bar with the C note, which isn't in the G major chord. Accented passing notes like this, which fall on one of the 4 beats of the bar, stand out more and give phrases motion and tension. This is resolved when a chord note is heard. Bars 3 and 4 are unchanged with only chord notes, so you can hear the difference. Here's how that sounds. If you want to learn more ways to write your first song, then like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now we've got a full palette of notes to play with, we can try out lots of simple techniques to spice up our melodies. The first idea is called a suspension. So far I have stopped melody phrases as the chords change, but you can play a note and then hold it whilst the chords change. If you play a chord note and hold it over a change, then its role changes once the new chord is heard. If it becomes a non-chord note, then it is suspended until we play a chord note and resolve it. I'll do this between bars 1 and 2 by holding the note E over the chord change. You can also do the opposite, where you play a non-chord note that is part of the next chord and hold it over the change. This is called anticipation. I use this idea between bars 2 and 3, holding the C note, which is part of the A minor chord. You will also come across common notes that are shared between chords and hold them over changes for a different feel. I demonstrate this between bars 3 and 4 with the A note. Have a listen to the different vibe each of these ideas brings to the melody. You can also keep on coming back to one particular note. This is known as a pedal tone. This gives a sense of continuity to the melody, as an anchor that the listener can grab hold of whilst everything else changes. In this next example, I adapt our melody to keep on coming back to the C note as a pedal. Did you notice something about the previous progression? The first 4 notes of the first 2 bars were identical. This introduces a really popular melodic idea, sequences. Sequences take the same melodic shape and move it up or down over different chords. You can also simply repeat it, like in the last example, but it's more common to move it up or down with each chord change. How far you move it is up to you. You just need to preserve the shape of the melodic line. In the next example, I take the original shape and move it up over the second chord. I then move it up again over the third chord to create a rising melody. Notice how the melody feels the same due to the shape being recycled, but also different because the actual notes being played have changed. This balance between repetition and variation is crucial to crafting great melodies. Thinking about melodies in terms of shape or contour is a simple yet powerful way of writing better melodies. The last melody had a series of rises and falls, but overall it climbed up. You can think of this like a mountain range, with different heights of peaks and then valleys between them. You could also have a melody that trended down. The direction of chord progression can be a useful guide here. For example, the chords I've used in the examples have overall trended down. The lowest note in the first C major chord is higher than the F note in the F major chord. So in the next example, I'm going to use these notes like a target, which will pull the melody down towards the final F note. Thinking of the melody like a landscape also allows you to consider the idea of leaps and steps. Steps are where notes are next to each other. This is like a gentle slope. There's no problem with walking along this as it takes minimal effort, but it isn't very exciting. The opposite of this is a big leap. This is like a sheer mountain face. It's exciting and challenging to climb, but takes a lot of effort. An ideal hike has some parts which are gentle steps, allowing you to take it easy and recover before or after scaling a more difficult leap. This balancing act is important with melodies. Too many steps where notes hardly move is boring, but too many leaps makes it chaotic and hard to follow. Big leaps are also a sign of bigger emotion and will stick out more, so consider saving them for a key moment in your song. In the next example, I reused the last melody again. It had plenty of steps and a bit of a leap down after the start of bar 2. I talked about wanting to target the last F note, but it was so close to the A note before it. So what I do this time is move it up an octave. This provides a big leap at the end. This is the biggest leap of the melody and goes up to the highest note of the melody, which is now F. Listen to the dramatic change this 1 point of difference brings. You want to keep things interesting with your melodies. We looked at the balance between leaps and steps, but you also need to think about rhythm. If you constantly use the same note durations, then things will become predictable. The same is true with your sequences. Constantly repeating sequences leads to listener fatigue and boredom. You want to play with expectations, set up sequences and then break them, or bring in breaks with no notes and then suddenly surprise with a flurry of notes. Also try and detach the rhythm of your melody with the rhythm of the chord changes. Don't always start and end phrases with the change of chords. In the next example, I use some of these ideas to bring added interest to the melody that we've been developing so far. Now you know how to write a song, it can become a bit overwhelming juggling all of the different parts of the process. Luckily, there are some great free tools that can help you. Let's take a look at them now. Writing a song is like baking a cake. You gather a list of ingredients, measure them out to the required weight, mix them together, and then put them in the oven. In a similar way, songs are a collection of smaller parts, such as chords and melodies. Different songs use different recipes and methods, but ultimately they all arrive at an end product. And just like a baker needs their utensils, you need the right tools for the job of songwriting. It used to take me months to write a song. I'd collect scraps of ideas on pieces of torn paper, if I could be bothered to write them down at all. Then when I wanted to write a song, I'd think, aha, all I have to do is find my paper full of ideas and this smash hit song will flow onto the page. But the problem was, I couldn't always find all of the notes I thought I'd written down. And the ones I did have were missing crucial information, if I could read them at all. How fast was I supposed to play these chords? What kind of strumming pattern would I use on the guitar? What key was I working with for this idea? All of this meant that when I sat down to write a full song, I'd often start fresh and write as much as I could down into a notebook. So a lot of these great ideas were lost forever. I had the same problem with songwriting with one of my bandmates. We'd jam together and come up with some good ideas that we wanted to save for later. But only having pen and paper to hand, a lot of the nuance and detail would get lost over time. And when we wanted to practice again, we didn't have a good reference point and the original song would be lost. This all changed when me and my friend took a songwriting course. We wanted to get some help with our craft as we were taking it much more seriously. And while the course offered interesting information about the expected things, like chord progressions and melody development, it also offered one piece of pure gold. A website where you could create and store musical ideas. A tool that had music theory baked in, so you could focus on being creative and not worry about anything else. The perfect support for a new and aspiring songwriter, which allowed me and my songwriting friends to quickly create and share ideas. It's called HookPad and it's completely free to get started. There's a link in the description if you want to check it out. I always recommend HookPad for songwriters, whether they are brand new to the craft or more seasoned pros. It allows you to quickly see what chords are in a key and add them to your song. Then once you have some chords selected, you can see what notes are in each chord. This makes writing complementary melodies a breeze. You have a range of playback sounds to fit your style of music, and you can also add lyrics. These are syllable matched to any melodies you write, which gives you a great visual representation of your song. You can also sort your song into different sections and rearrange the structure easily and simply. You can then save the song and export it as a score or a tab, or you can simply share a link with someone else, which makes collaboration straightforward. There are loads more options if you want to go deeper with HookPad. Start exploring today with the link in the description. This will change the way you create songs for the better. Have you got any songwriting tool suggestions? Let me know in the comments below. One big problem for songwriters is inspiration. Even with all of the help that a tool like HookPad offers, sometimes you just can't seem to come up with any fresh ideas. So what can you do in this situation? What I used to do was listen to some of my favourite songs. The idea wasn't to try and imitate the songs, but just to see if it unlocked any new ways of thinking about my music. The issue came up if I wanted to try out a similar sound. Without working more on my ear training, I needed to look up the chords or notes for the song. This was time consuming and took away from the energy of songwriting. Well, the next tool can help you with this problem. It's called the Theory Tab Database. It's curated by the same people who make HookPad and offers tens of thousands of song tabs. You can instantly listen to the song's chords and melody played on piano or along with the YouTube video. You can then open these directly into HookPad if you want a great starting point for a new song. Now, you obviously need to be careful with directly copying other songs, particularly melodies and lyrics. But what I find useful is looking for patterns you can apply for your own music. For example, how often do the chords change? And what progressions are being used? Are there any interesting rhythmic elements in the melody that I can reuse? This is what inspiration is all about. Parts of songs that you find interesting can influence your own music and get you out of a creative rut. There's a link to the Theory Tab database in the description below. It's completely free and a huge resource to supplement your songwriting. Having access to this world of music knowledge will definitely be a game changer for your songwriting. One of my favourite parts of the songwriting process is creating new chord progressions. If you've seen any videos on this channel before, you'll know I've covered these extensively, and for good reason. They are a great starting point for new songwriters, allowing you to easily shape the sound and feel of your song. But a problem many people have is they create the first few chords for a progression or song and then become stuck, or they keep defaulting to tried and tested sequences, and then all of your songs sound the same. You can use the Theory Tab database to get inspiration as previously mentioned, but there is another way to navigate this resource that is a real game changer. It's called Theory Tab Trends. Again, it's completely free and I'll link it in the description. When you start, all the action is on the left hand side of the page. Use the drop downs to select the key of your song, then click on the first chord you have. For example, C major. You'll then see a list of songs that contain that chord, and this diagram which gives you options for the next chord, with percentages of songs that use those chords in that order. Now click on the next chord. I'll go for F major and then G major. You can then pick one of the next chords to try on your song and continue the process, or you can move across to the song list. For example, I'll click on Space Oddity by David Bowie. Now you can see that song load up on the right, where you can play the song if you want. So in this example, maybe I'd try an A major chord after C, F and G. There's also another option within Trends which is really useful. If under the key letter you select Rel at the top, then you get a slightly different view. Now you're presented with options labelled as Roman numerals. This pulls all of the songs for that key type and shows you how different types of chord function relative to one another. This is where Roman numeral chord analysis is really useful. For example, if you've ever heard someone refer to a progression as 1-4-5, then this is what they mean. And if this is confusing for you, then I'll link a playlist at the end of this video to help you out. As before, if you click on a chord, it'll open up and keep presenting options by popularity and then songs containing those chords in that order. Remember that these aren't just basic major and minor chords. And if you click Other, you'll be presented with all sorts of choice. This is great for exploring new chords and ideas. But what if you already have part of a progression, but you're not sure what key it's in? What do you do then? There's another useful songwriting tool called Chord Scale Finder, which is part of a wider website called Scales Chords. That is another game changer for beginner songwriters. I'll put a link in the description for you. To use this for yourself, next to chord key, select the letter of your chord. That is the root note of the chord. Then next to chord type, select what sort of chord it is. So if I wanted to select my C, F and G major chords, again it would look like this. You can get more detailed with your options if you want. including certain types of scales and certain types of chords. This can be useful if maybe you can only play a few chords on guitar, for example, and just want to see things which you will be able to use. When you are ready, press Find Suggestions. You'll now be presented with a list of potential chords for your progression. You can click on the speaker icon and preview them right on the page if you want to. The most useful thing is if you scroll down a bit. On the left hand side you'll see scales that fit your chord. Think of these like your key and hook pad. So the first result here is C major, and we know the chords I chose are in the key of C major, so this makes sense. Then on the right are the suggested chords, and depending on the options you chose initially, you'll see different types of chords here. They are organised by how many notes are in the chord, which is useful for sorting through which ones you can play comfortably on your instrument. Now if you come across a chord you like the sound of, but you can't find it in HookPad, then don't panic. You can click on search and then type in the chord name, and you'll be able to add it to your song, regardless of whether it's in the key or not. This opens up a whole world of opportunity for your songs. You now have the ability to use any chord you like in a systematic and interesting way. This will change everything for your songwriting, giving you endless variations at your fingertips. If you want to write a rock song, there are a few more things to consider. I'll show you some of them now. Just like scaling a mountain, writing your first rock song can feel like a daunting climb. But with a little guidance, you can reach the summit and create something truly epic. In this video, I will show you how to write your first rock song so you can craft music that will stand the test of time. Rock is a broad genre. It spans everything from pop to heavy metal in style, and the boundaries of this are constantly debated and evolving. The first thing you need to decide is where on this spectrum you want your rock song to live. If you reach too far in a direction you're not comfortable with, you can fall. So think carefully about this. If in doubt, start with the influence of your favourite rock song, or think about what you have the ability to perform live. Deciding on the type of sound you're going after then dictates the way in which you will carve out your rock song. Rock is predominantly focused on the guitar. As such, it is often performed in guitar-friendly keys such as A, G and E major. And the first thing guitar players will reach for is a favourite riff or chord progression. This is a great starting place for your rock song. If you have a memorable riff or chord progression, then consider this for the chorus. The chorus is a good point to start sculpting your first rock song from, because it is often the simplest and most direct part of a tune. Think about the sound you are trying to reach with your song. This will lead you to the most appropriate chord voicings to use. For example, say you are using an A major chord. You could play it in a standard open voicing like this, or move it up the neck and play it as an arpeggio like this. Or crank up the distortion and play it as a power chord. Thinking like this can help you to craft interesting and memorable sounds. Now you have two paths to take. Both can lead to the rock song summit, but each one is slightly different. You can take a single song section, such as a chorus, and work on every element within it: chords, lyrics and melody. This is a steeper and more dangerous path, but may ultimately be quicker. Then use this completed section to influence the other parts of your song. Or you can take the other path, which is initially easier. On this path you create all of the chords first, then work on the other elements of the entire song in turn. This path may appear easier to begin with, but rapidly gets steeper and has a more difficult finish. If you're unsure which path to choose, don't panic. With experience you'll come to prefer one of these paths. For now, we'll turn left and continue to work on the single section. Now you've got a strong foundation for your song, it's time to attempt the next summit. And this is a big problem for a lot of songwriters: lyrics. Just like a hiker carefully choosing their next step, you need to select words that fit the tone of your song. This goes back to where your song lives on the rock spectrum. Pairing the feel-good lyrics of a pop rock song might not sit well with a punk rock chord progression. The theme of your lyrics will also give you clues to the type of language that you use. The easiest thing to do is to find a theme that fits the mood of the music that you have sketched out so far. You can also reach for some common rock themes. Here's 5 to look at now. Number 1, love and relationships. This is a popular theme in rock songs. Songs about falling in love, heartbreak, and the complexities of relationships are common. Number 2, rebellion. Many rock songs celebrate rebellion and the rejection of authority. These songs may be about standing up for oneself, breaking free from societal norms, or fighting against injustice. Number 3, politics and social issues. Some rock songs tackle political and social issues such as poverty, war, and discrimination. These songs can be powerful statements that call for change. Number 4, angst and pain. Lots of rock songs deal with darker themes such as depression, anxiety, and addiction. These songs can be cathartic for both the artist and the listener. Number 5, fantasy and escapism. Some rock songs explore fantastical worlds or offer a means of escape from reality. When sculpting your lyrics, keep it simple. Songs have more repetition than you think, so try and write a single simple song section. Use the chords or riff you had earlier and play it with your lyrics. Your song is starting to take shape, and now you need to work on the melody to further elevate the song towards the rock gods. Think of a simple melody that could go with the rest of your song. You may have begun thinking about this when writing the lyrics. Don't overdo this. Go with the notes you hear in your head. Sing or play them and record it. A tool like HookPad can also help you here. If you want to think about individual notes, then start with the notes in the chords of your song. Try and build interesting rhythmic ideas for your melody and repeat them throughout. Simple repeated melodies are found widely in rock music. Also consider who is going to sing the song and what style they will perform it in. Are they able to hit high notes with a wide range, or is their vocal ability more limited? This is like climbing up the mountain. Some may be able to take great leaps or strides and still climb up without falling. Others will need to be more careful, taking gradual, small steps to reach the summit. Both ways can work, so choose what's most appropriate for you. Looking back, there are actually several routes you could have taken. Melody first instead of lyrics and chords, or even starting with an existing poem or set of lyrics. All roads lead to the summit of rock. You need to work to your strengths and your weaknesses, and you'll only discover these with practice. Just below the summit, it's time to set up base camp. Take a rest and think about the journey so far and the final push to come. You've got all the elements for your rock song, but to get to the pinnacle, you need to think about performance. How will dynamic changes shape the sound of your song? Will you have quiet and loud sections, or will you gradually build the volume as you go through? Taking some time and coming back to your song with fresh ears can be beneficial. On the last leg of your journey, it's all about further sculpting your sound. What effects will you use on the guitar? And will you reach for an instrumental break or iconic rock solo? This is where your unique rock sculpture comes to life. Be careful though, because at any moment, an avalanche can bring you right back down the mountain and you could end up snowblind. If you rush to the top and just want to play a solo without any foundations, then you are much more likely to fall. Building up carefully and thinking about how your listeners think of the song will help you to create long-lasting rock classics. If you're a guitarist like me, then you'll have loads of riff ideas knocking about. But in order to turn them into full songs, you need to understand a few simple things. Let's dive into what they are now. Riffs, whilst associated with the electric guitar, can be played on any instrument. They combine elements of melody, harmony and rhythm that are repeated to stick in listeners' minds and produce powerful songs. A big problem lots of wannabe songwriters have is taking initial ideas or riffs and turning them into full-blown songs. But this is much easier to do than you might think. So let's start with the first way to do this, which is to power up. In order to fill out the rest of your song, you're going to need some chords. But what chords should you use and in what order? The easiest way to start, which requires no music theory knowledge, is just to try out each note of the riff as the root of a power chord. To explore this, let me introduce you to my example riff. Throughout the video, I'll use this to demonstrate each technique. I wanted to create a really simple riff that a beginner guitarist could play, so I just worked on some ideas using the A minor pentatonic scale. This is primarily in first position, which is probably the first thing you will practice when learning to solo. It's the basis of loads of rock riffs and solos. Here's how the riff sounds, with the tab on screen if you want to play along. Now take the first tip and use each of the riff notes as the root note of a power chord. To begin, I'll try out the same rhythm as the riff, changing power chords as the notes of the riff change. Rhythmic elements are critical to riffs, so feel free to use them throughout your songs with chord changes and other song parts. This can provide a subtle DNA or thread that runs through your song and makes it feel more cohesive. Here's how that could sound. I don't think I'd use the whole thing, but I like the feel of the final 2 bars played with power chords. I'll add a couple of other power chords derived from the riff to break this up after 2 repeats, before repeating it again. Here's how that could look. The next question is, how can this be worked into a full song? This takes us nicely onto the second way to turn your riffs into songs. Number 2, embrace structure. If you only use one tip from today, it should be this one. By using tried and tested song structures, you have an instant framework to fit your riff into. This will get you most of the way towards a complete song and allow you to focus on what needs finishing. This means that you complete more songs, and by completing more songs, you'll become a better songwriter. If you're new to this, then the best approach is to keep it simple. I discussed the simple riff I created earlier, so now I'll plug it into a really simple song structure. This is riff, verse, chorus, bridge or solo, chorus times 2, riff. This structure allows for multiple repeats of the riff, whilst minimising the additional writing that is required to complete the song. This is even easier if you reuse the riff for the verse in a simplified way. For example, you could strip back all the other instruments and just get the bass to play the riff, or take out additional brief notes and articulations and reduce the riff to a skeleton. Here's how that could sound using my example riff and power chord selection from the previous section. I'm just going to play the riff, verse and chorus so you can get an idea of this approach. So far, I've not delved into music theory to develop the song, and the next tip doesn't require any theory knowledge either, showing you how easy it can be to write songs. Number 3, let your riffs brew. Most songs are built on a single musical idea accompanied by a few variations. This is where developing some really simple changes to your initial riff can be enough to finish writing a whole song. For example, look at the song Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. What does everyone remember about this song? It's the riff, which has become universally recognised, to the point that it is chanted in football stadiums around the world. The whole song is just the riff and variations upon it. It starts with the riff played an octave down using a pitch shift guitar pedal. You can think of this like the riff in its simplest form, stripped back to basics. This serves as the intro and plays during what could be described as the verse, the only section with a vocal melody. Then 2 chords act as a pre-chorus of sorts, leading to a chorus-type section which just utilises the riff again, this time in a more aggressive, distorted manner. This is a bit like the structure discussed in the previous section, writing through with variations on an initial riff idea. So without any additional notes, you can vary up your riff with effects and play style. Let's go back to the example riff now to explore this. The intro and verse will remain the same. But this time I'll steal the Seven Nation Army idea and play a couple of power chords as a pre-chorus before playing a more aggressive version of the riff as a chorus. Here's how that could sound. You could also brew up some deeper variations on your riff. Go back to your initial source of inspiration and just add 1 or 2 notes to see if something fits. Again, this part of the process is not about consciously working things out, and it's just about simple experimentation. Here are a couple of basic variations on the initial riff that add a few notes. Listen for the difference this brings. Now let's further expand the choice of notes. Number 4, put your riff on the scales. So far I've been using an instinctive process to develop a riff and related song, and as you're aware, this can allow you to complete a song quite easily. But now it's time to be more intentional and use some theory to help us. The first thing to do is work out what notes are in your riff. If you've composed the riff on the guitar and aren't familiar with the notes on the fretboard, you might need to look them up. So the original version of the example riff has the notes A, E, D, G and C. I wrote this using the A minor pentatonic scale, so this doesn't come as a surprise. But what if you wrote this without any scales in mind? And what other scales do these notes feature in? There are many plugins, apps and websites that can help with this task. I'm going to use the website on screen. I'll link it in the description below as well. You can see that I've got a range of options for potential scales. This gives you a whole palette of notes to choose from, to shape and colour your song or alter your riff with. I'm going to keep this simple, and because my riff starts on the A note, I'm going to stick to scales with an A tonic note. That means they start with an A note and are therefore named after this. You don't have to treat the first or lowest note in your riff like this. There are no rules here. The two scales that interest me are the A blues/A pentatonic blues scales. They add a single note to the 5 notes I've been using, D sharp/E flat. This blue note adds a dissonant edge, which is essential to the blues sound. Listen to it in this revised version of the original riff. Now you've got different scale options for developing your riffs, it's time to think about some more chord options. Number 5, the key to the city. Closely related to the previous step is to work out what key you want your song to be in. The key of a song relates to the notes of a scale that it uses, and therefore what chords feature diatonically. That just means chords which are built using only scale notes. You saw in the previous section that the original riff could be in several different keys. Songs are typically written in the major or natural minor key, so I'll start by narrowing it down to those options to keep things simple. I'm going to use some new chords for the chorus section, allowing it to contrast with the riff. C major is probably the easiest key to understand, using all the white keys on the piano, so I'm going to use that to begin with. The C major key has 7 chords in it. These are C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor and B diminished. You're free to use any of these chords, but to make life easier you can just start with a common chord progression. I've created a guide with 6 popular major key chord progressions that you can use straight away. Head to majorkeychords.com and download your free copy today. Link is also in the description. I'm going to use the 4th example to build a chord progression around. It will use the rhythm from the end of the riff again, as you saw earlier. I'll use the first 3 chords twice in a loop, before going to A minor and ending on C to provide a major anchor. This contrast between the minor pentatonic harmony of the riff and the major harmony of the chorus is a pleasing idea that has been used in many songs. For example, Robert Plant's Tie-Dye on the Highway and Leveller's Hope Street use similar ideas. You could also increase this contrast by playing the minor blues riff version from earlier, as this contains a note that is not found in the C major key. Here's how that could sound. can also look for chord ideas within the riff itself. Parts of the riff are often sequential and contain notes from chords played as arpeggios. That means the notes of a chord played one after the other. You can use the website I linked earlier, which has a chord finder, to try this out. For example, the first 3 notes in the original riff are A, E and D. These are the notes in the A sus4 chord. In bar 1, these notes are followed by the G note. A, E, D and G are the notes in the A7 sus4 chord. So bar 1 could be described as an A7 sus4 chord, and bar 2 as an A sus4 chord. Bar 3 just contains the notes A and C, and bar 4 A and G. These could spell out a number of chords, as there are only 2 notes in each. In the next example, I'm going to use this idea to create chords for the verse. I'll just play 1 chord per bar that follow the riff notes. I've chosen A minor for bar 3 and C6 for bar 4. These have the riff notes in them, but also allow some ambiguity about the key. It could be C major or A minor. Here's how the song sounds using this idea for the verse. So far I've had a separation between riff and chords, but what happens if you want to bring them together? Number 6. Harmonise your riff. If you play chords whilst the riff plays, then you are harmonising it. This means that you are hearing a new selection of notes, which provide a different feel to the song. You can think of each moment of a song like a big chord, which all of the instruments and voices are contributing to. If you pause at any time and look at all of the notes being heard, then you can work out what chord is being played. But this isn't required, and you can simply use some of the previous tips to have a go at this. The most harmonious chords to use are, unsurprisingly, those which contain the riff notes. Luckily, this is something I showed you in the previous section. So all I'm going to do in the next example is play the verse chords from the last version of the song and play the riff at the same time. You've got lots of options as to what instrument plays the riff and how you arrange things. I'll keep the guitar playing the chords and allow the bass to play the riff. Here's how that sounds. You can also use chords from one of the keys you revealed by looking at the notes in the riff earlier. You could do this as before and play 1 chord per bar. But what if you want something a little more interesting? You can look to the notes in your riff that stand out. Change chords when these notes are played and it will highlight the importance of them and can add real drama. It also brings in some of the riff rhythm to link the riff and the harmony. For example, in the original riff I think that the first note A stands out in bar 1 along with the highest note G. All I'm going to do is take chords with the same root note from the C major key and play them with these notes. I'll do the same in bar 2 but change from A minor to C. Then I'll play a bar of F major and a bar of G major. This could be written as 6-5-6-1-4-5. Here's how that sounds with the bass playing the riff again. Bass notes often imply the harmony above them and are important for driving a song forward. So in the next example, I'll play the riff on guitar and use the bass notes to reharmonise. You could use any notes from the relevant scale, but to keep things simple and provide a point of comparison, I'll just play the root notes of the chords from the previous example. I'll change notes at the same rate that the chords change, but add just a little rhythm for interest. Here's how this sounds. Now you've considered many different elements of harmony, it's time to move on to the melody. Number 7. Think about the tune. Be careful with trying to sing a melody over a riff. A busy riff can distract from the vocals, and it can be difficult to work out what melody to sing over it. For this reason, as a beginner, I'd recommend contrasting the riff with chord-based song sections to sing over. Many vocalists will just sing the notes and rhythms of the riff to make this easier. There's nothing wrong with this approach. But what if you want to try out something different? Another technique is to fit your melody into the gaps in the riff. This isn't always possible, but often a riff will have some natural breaks in it which you can fill with melodic or vocal lines. For example, here's a simple melody using notes from the C major scale. It's played on the piano in an almost call and response way with the riff, being heard over the gaps and longer notes in the riff. You've got a full song now, but what if you want something in a different style? Well, the next section will help you. Bonus section. It's not just about rock. I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but riffs don't have to be played on distorted guitars in a rock style. They can be played on any instrument and in any genre of music. For example, think about Tracy Chapman's iconic 1988 song, Fast Car. Despite being a mainly acoustic, reflective song, it is built around an instantly recognisable riff. It varies the riff being used in the verse with full chords for the more upbeat chorus section. With this in mind, I'm going to present a more relaxed, lingering version of the song. It will use more sus chords and seventh chords, as well as a gentle piano backing to give the song a completely different feel. Here's how that could sound. You've learned everything you need to know to write a song, but how can you put all of this together? I'll show you a real-time songwriting example in the video on screen. Watch that now to fully understand major key songwriting.